Hello, everyone. I'm a lobbyist, and I enjoy saying so because it gets people very puzzled. From there, the conversation can go both ways. In the first case scenario, the positive one, the people will get interested and they will be also curious and ask for some explanations. And in the other cases, the worst case scenarios, I get the disgusted look, meaning that I'm categorized very quickly as a manipulative person or a liar or someone with very low moral standards. So much for a first impression, right? It happens more often than you would think. So for these people, probably blacklisting lobbying in general would be a way to make the world a better place. And believe me when I say I wish they were right. So I'm a lobbyist. Nice to meet you all. I really hope that now you're more curious than disgusted. And I'm very happy to have been invited to discuss today about what lobbying is and to try and answer the question, should we blacklist this profession? Probably more than any other profession, lobbying has its super hyped scandal in the media. Now, the difference is when you see some misbehavior, when you read about some misbehavior from a doctor or a lawyer or a journalist, because you already know what they are doing concretely, you will not tend to generalize. You will not tend to believe that this specific behavior that you're reading about is representative of the whole profession. Now, when I'm saying that I'm a lobbyist, I can assure you, I understand that people do not really visualize what it is that I'm doing. So in this sense, when they read about a scandal linked to lobbying, they will tend to generalize and think, oh, this is what lobbying is about. So what is lobbying? I mean, the real part of it, the hidden part of the iceberg, apart from those very widely documented scandals in the media. Well, first of all, you have to remember that lobbying is closely linked to power. So whenever you have a specific center of power, you will have the related specific lobbying. So the profession is not the same in Washington, Brussels, Paris, London, Berlin, etc., etc. Now, in my case, I'm going to talk about my home turf, which is Brussels and the European institutions. So the commendable part of lobbying is to act as an intermediary between public authorities and businesses and to translate for both of them. It's very hard sometimes because they do not speak the same language to communicate clearly one with another. And it's very important because in the end, a regulator would not be able to do his job properly if he doesn't get what it is about, right? I mean, it has to understand the market, the specificity of a specific company, etc., etc. In this sense, another function that is recognized is that lobbyists are here to make sure that public authorities and policy executives will get access to an accurate and complete information. I remember last year, the French Minister for European Affairs referred to in the press about the difference between the staff employed by the European Commission and the staff employed by the city of Paris, highlighting the fact that they are similar, or even the staff of Paris city is even bigger than the European Commission's. Well, this was kind of controversial because the comparison is difficult to make, but still the point is that the European Commission is relying on a very small staff, while the scope of regulation it is drafting is very wide, because we are talking about 27 different member states now. So lobbyists are providing additional data and external inputs that are always useful for the regulator to have the full picture. So the idea you may have of the lobbyist that is shaking hands, drinking cocktails, walking down some dark power alley, engineering some evil plans to ensure that his interest will go through, might not be very close to reality. I mean, in 80-90% of the case, we're talking about people relying on their expertise, spending a lot of time in front of their computers, trying to analyze regulation, understanding the impact that it may have on the very specific interest they're representing. And be careful here, I'm talking about specific interest. I'm not talking about the general interest. This is probably where and why lobbying is most of the time misunderstood or even despised. It's because they're evaluated and assessed against their capacity to promote and defend the general interest. But the fact is, the general interest is not their responsibility nor their job. They provide public authorities with data, information, and arguments, and their responsibility and integrity as professionals are to be found in the accuracy and the veracity of such information they're providing. In the end, it's up to the regulators and the politicians to make sure that they are hearing everyone, make sure that they are gathering enough data, and then making an arbitration to ensure that they will protect the general interest. I remember several years ago, I was working on a telecom regulation, and some European Commission officials were presenting the results of such dialogue, let's say, and concluding on the arbitration they made on this regulation. And they said that unfortunately, all the representatives that they had been discussing with were partly unsatisfied by the choice they made. And they were kind of happy about it because they concluded that it meant they had done their job very well. And I completely and strongly agree with that. Now, back to the initial question. Should we blacklist lobbying? Well, the truth is you can't. You can't because lobbying is the power closest to it. Whenever and wherever a centralized power emerge in society and gets to decide for the rest of the economy or the society or the group, you will automatically have some representatives trying to reach out to it to make sure that their interests are protected and that the decisions taken will not impact them in a negative way, right? I'm not going to try and make a history of lobbying in general, but I'm pretty sure that lobbying has always existed in a form or another alongside with power. This means that if you try to push it out of the door, it will make its way back through the window. And this is when and where things might get ugly. Because it's exactly what you want to avoid, right? On the contrary, you would prefer to ensure that lobbying remains in the light, so you will get closer to the objective of preventing some wrongful behaviors. My last point is you get the lobbying that you deserve. More precisely, governments are getting the lobbying they deserve. I mean, the less transparent and the more corrupted a government will be, the more room for maneuver it will leave to wrongful practices, manipulation attempts, and sideway behaviors. As you bake, so shall you eat. So, if on the contrary you ensure that the processes and channels of communications between public authorities and private representatives are strictly regulated and transparent, well, you will make sure to leave no room for corruption and manipulation. Like any other professions, lobbying needs to be regulated to prevent black sheep who exist, unfortunately, to jeopardize the reputation of the world profession. In the recent years, the European Commission made some efforts to try and regulate, asking lobbyists to register online on a website and to declare the interest that they are representing, who they are, and also the financial and human resources that they are dedicating to lobbying the European institutions. This public register is online. You can go and have a look. It's not perfect. It's not mandatory. But I can assure you that if you want to do your job right in Brussels, and if you want to discuss with public deciders in the European Commission, you should be registered. Otherwise, they will refuse to discuss with you. And as a lobbyist, I have to say that I'm strongly supporting this trend towards more transparency and with more rules, because the more institutionalized my profession will be, the more people will know how strict and serious I am about getting my data and my arguments straight, right? Hopefully, I will get less and less disgusted look and better first impressions. Thank you so much.